Now it's quite amazing just the number of pieces of wood you need to make up a pair of trestles, because each trestle's got 4 legs, and they've each got 4 cross pieces, so times 2, that's, do your arithmetic? It's a lot of pieces of wood, and also there are a pair of really chunky top pieces, and these are the bits that the legs are hinged to. Now I've got it laid out here so you can see just what bits are required. First of all, I've got the top of the trestles, and this will be the very top pieces, and then I've got the top cross pieces, and then I've got the lower cross pieces, and here I've got the legs, and I'll bring you in close to look at these. Now the frame which includes these legs will be hinged at the top, but at the bottom, I can show you, and this is roughly how it will be, I've angled the feet off here, and they're at 15 degrees. Now with the offcut, I've cut a little piece off here to extend the foot, to make it just a bit bigger, so that it will not put so much pressure on a carpet or whatever, and leave a mark if it's left for a long period of time. Now I really do need to show you this. This is a Thompson class locomotive for Hornby's 00 gauge model railway system, and it's dedicated to Edward Thompson, who was the Chief Mechanical Engineer of the London and North East Railway, LNER, during the war years. He had a pretty tough time because materials were in short supply, and he had to do a lot of work, which didn't enthuse a lot of people that worked there, but he had to make a lot of cost savings and material savings in particular, because steel was in short supply. But anyway, this locomotive bears his name, and Edward Thompson is the great uncle of my wife. How about that? Now I'm just about to put the rounding over detail on the leg parts, but I've already done it to the cross members, and I've done that on my router table. If you don't have a router table, you can do this by hand with a hand sander, just to round the bits off so that when it's being handled there are no sharp edges and certainly no splinters. Right, I've got to the stage now where I've cut out all the pieces for the actual trestles, and I've got one side of a trestle laid out here so you can see it. I've set the depth for the dominoes where I want it, which is 25mm, because these are 50mm dominoes, and I'm on what is known as the narrow setting. And I've got myself set up so I can push my stock against here, and for the ones in the ends I can push my stock against there. Now once you've done the domino cutting with the machine, the assembly is very easy. I always put dominoes into these longer pieces first and then into the leg or whatever. And so I'm just going to get this glue in place and the dominoes in place, and away we go. And I know the machine itself is awfully expensive, but if you're a regular woodworker, if you're rich as well I suppose, then it's a pretty good idea to get one, because the domino has absolutely transformed the way that I do my woodwork. Get that the right way around. The only thing to remember when you're doing domino work is that when you rest the machine on this piece and then on that piece, those two faces must again be the ones that line up. The other beauty of using dominoes is that you don't need to leave it clamped up for a very long time. So I gave it about 5 minutes, and I'm taking the clamps off, and I can stand this to one side and I'll get on with the next one. And the tops of the two trestles are here. I've rounded over the top edge. They're exactly 900 wide. They don't want to stick out beyond the trestles because it just isn't necessary and it makes them more awkward to store. But there's one operation I've yet to do with these, and that is to have a scallop along here. Now, if you imagine you've got your train set on the board, but underneath the board you want some wires to run forward and back or wherever. And so there's a chance that some of those wires will be going under the top where these pieces would otherwise interfere with them. And having cut those, I'm going to just round over the edges. You may have noticed that I got a little bit of a split as I was machining this piece. So I put a bit of glue under there and a couple of bits of masking tape to hold it on, and that'll be perfect. Now, in order to cut the hinge slots, I've made a jig. I've got a guide bush in my router and the appropriate size cutter. And so all I've got to do is whiz this around and it will make the right size aperture for the hinges. However, I've got to set the depth. So on a plunge router, you have a little gadget like this, which allows you to set the depth so that when you plunge, it will stop at whatever depth you've set. And so what I've done is I'm going to plunge this all the way down so that the cutter is touching the wood. And then I'm going to raise this up, put my hinge underneath this arm here, and then tighten that up. So the gap now between the bottom of this thing and there is the same as the thickness of the hinge, whilst the cutter tip is touching the wood. And so that is now set, that's firmly locked. I can now do my cuts. So I've checked my jig is firmly attached. Now this end is flush here with the end of this top piece, and because the top piece is the same width as the legs, then that's my datum and that will work in every case. So here we go. Now, because that's a round cutter, there's a tiny bit in the corner to chop out, and I'll just do that with a chisel. It takes a second. And there, that hinge fits perfectly. Absolutely spot on. Well, those hinges went in very easily, having used that jig. Now I've got to put stays across here, because otherwise it won't stay up. Now I'm doing the stays, and what I've done is I've created a master, and I've drilled a small hole, about 1.5 millimeters, through the ends where I want to put my screws, which are going to hold it in place. And then I've put a short nail through, it just protrudes the other side. And I then have a distance piece here. I have been experimenting, so you'll see a few marks where I've been experimenting. I'll put this along here, make sure it's evenly spaced, and then give it a tap. And with this piece as my reference piece, which I'll use this piece to do all of the marking, I can then have a consistency so that all of these are identical. And I've actually already used this to mark all of the pieces, so they too are a copy. Well, the trestles are now done, and I'm ready to start work on the top. But before I do that, let me just point out one thing about the trestles. My design, because of the hinges on either side, allows to rotate a bit like that. Now, I have tested this. I was expecting that to happen. And once you put something flat on the top, it goes to the proper position. So I'm not worried about that. Were this designed to be used for woodworking purposes, where you might put a piece of wood on top, then try and saw it or whatever, it might not be quite as it should be. But for the purpose that I've designed these, it's perfectly okay. Now, I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier in the video that I had to buy the sheet material for the top in 2 pieces in order to be able to get it in the car. I didn't have the roof racks at the time. So I've got this joining piece, which will be in the middle between the 2 pieces. It will serve to make the joint between the two, and it will also serve to stiffen it across the width of the table. But in order to do this, I've got to create a rebate on the 2 pieces of plywood that go into this eye section. I'll bring it up close to the camera, and there you can see the shape of this piece of wood. I may have mentioned already there are holes in this, that when this is in place, any wires that are associated with the top can pass through these holes under the table. Now the depth of the rebate will need to be, this says 8.9, and I imagine the other side is exactly the same, 8.94. So I'm going to make my rebate 8 millimeters. Now you may remember I did a video about this Axminster rebate kit, and I'm now looking for the 8 millimeter ring, and that should be, let's take a look, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I expect this to be quite dusty, so I've put this dust shroud connector on my router. The cutter is all set up. Well, it was slightly dusty, but not too bad, and that is the most perfect cut. Now I've got the edging made up to go around the whole of the tabletop, and it's approximately 60 millimeters wide, and then the plywood fits in this gap here, and there's a little bit of a lip above, and that means that if you had any form of matting or whatever, that would be contained. A pencil wouldn't roll off the top, and so on, and it just makes it just that bit neater, and also easier to handle when you're propping the thing up against a wall. Right, I've now got to get these pieces of plywood to size. Now that edge which I created with the rebate is now my reference edge, and I've set up some low dogs here, tall dogs there and there, and I'm now going to do a right angle cut to trim this edge so it's perfectly square. I'll do the same with the other edge, and then I'll do the final cut to get it the right length. And all that will be perfectly square because everything is being set up on the Trestle cutting station, created with the path guide system, of course. Ha ha! Absolutely spot on. Now my gluing strategy is very simple. It's simple because I haven't got clamps long enough to go the whole length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue and clamp one end there, one end piece there, and then I'm going to do the same here, put this end piece on, and at that stage I could put the middle piece on one bit, and then finally I'll join the 2 pieces together at the middle, and after that's done I then put the sides on. I will be using screws. There'll be 1, 2, 3 down each side, and the reason for that is this wood is a bit too thin for a sensible domino. It would be okay, but it just isn't worth the effort, and I'll put a nice brass screw through 1, 2, 3, same on the other side, and that will be it. And as I've got 4 clamps, I'm going to put 4 on here because I'm about to go and have a bite to eat, and I'll be able to take these off as soon as I've finished. Spot on, absolutely super. I love this little setup square that I was given when I visited Axminster Tools for a bloggers event. There were about a dozen of us. We had a great time. Well, I've got the two pieces of ply joined together in the middle. These side pieces are only just placed there just to help to keep it straight whilst the glue in the middle goes off. And hopefully by the morning I'll be able to then do these last bits, which will then finish the top off. Well, that's it, it's finished, sitting on its trestles, and I'm just about to put it onto the roof racks for the car so we can take it to my son's house so his children can start laying out their train track. Phew. Many thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.